He first emerged from the barracks and ventured out to assess the damage on the cities which were severely affected by the fighting in Sudan. He then met with members of the government for the first time since the conflict with the rival general erupted in mid-April, and opted to go meet Egyptian president to brief him about the war in his country. Sudan Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is a general on a mission. He has so far refused a proposed plan for lasting peace by his former deputy and says there will be no chance of a deal with traitors. Here's a report, the latest from Sudan.
The war in Sudan is unrelenting. Ever since the conflict began, military forces and the paramilitary group have been at each other's throats for months, with their bosses conducting and issuing commands from their bunkers. But that changed on the 24th of August. Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan came out of the barracks for the first time in 4 months. He first visits Omdurman's military camp, where hundreds of soldiers enthusiastically welcome their leader. He barely spends over 10 minutes at this camp. He then rushes to a hospital in the city of Atbara in Nile State, some 300 kilometers northeast of Khartoum. Here too, everything from the niceties to consoling with the patients was done in a huff. It took just a few minutes for the general to be in and out of the facility. The general ended his pleasantries with a tour of Al-Damer, where he met Sudanese citizens who were displaced from the capital Khartoum. Footage of Burhan, who was wearing his army fatigues and his trademark beret, have rarely been released since the fighting erupted in April. But the army posted images showing the general speaking to soldiers with a caption indicating he was at the Wadi Saitna air base north of Khartoum. Another video showed him surrounded by civilians in the capital's twin city of Omdurman, even as residents there reported fighting on the same day of his visit. The raging war between the rival generals has devastated Sudan, already an impoverished nation, and numerous attempts to mediate a ceasefire by the United States and Saudi Arabia have failed. Humanitarian aid groups have long been active in Sudan, where for years millions of Sudanese have relied on them for food and other assistance. As the war has dragged on with no let-up in sight, over half of the country is in need of humanitarian aid. Experts have warned that more than 6 million people face famine.
Now, while it's difficult to establish an exact number of casualties due to the intensity of the fighting and the fact that the remains of many of those killed have not been collected, identified or buried, tentative figures indicate that more than 4,000 people have so far been killed, including hundreds of civilians.
The United Nations also warned that hundreds of thousands of malnourished children could die if they do not receive treatment. Diseases such as measles, malaria, dengue and acute diarrhea are spreading. The army-controlled coastal city of Port Sudan has become a refuge from the war raging to the west. But its health system is in a state of near collapse due to power cuts and scarce supplies, and staff shortages now exacerbated by striking doctors. Doctors and nurses in the Red Sea city say they have not been paid for 4 months as the Sudanese government's budget has been decimated by the fighting.
The citizens also suffer. The marginalized ones, they cannot afford treatment in private hospitals. As you can see, the hospital is full.
The war between Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and his former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, who commands the paramilitary RSF, has been raging since April. It has spread from Khartoum and the western region of Darfur to Kordofan and Jazeera state, killing thousands and forcing millions to flee their homes. Bureau Report, WION World is One.